Shall we begin?
Yeah, sure.
I don't think if you're immunized, you don't need a mask.
Oh, we don't need a mask?
That's what the
Perfect.
sign on the front says,
Yeah, okay,
unless you choose to wear one.
great.
I guess I gotta do the gavel thing. This is the September 13th meeting of the Middletown Conservation Commission. We have a quorum, and I thank everybody for coming. Per the agenda, we have the minutes of the previous meeting to discuss, if anybody wants to have an addition or subtraction from that. Does anybody have any concerns about the last minutes?
Nope.
Motion to accept?
Make a motion to accept the minutes?
Second?
I second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
It's unanimous. Old business, we have the two continuing, the Sense Corporation solar panel project on West Main is being continued to work out some more zoning issues. Do you have anything to say about that, Warren?
I do not, only that it's being continued, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. And the Serenity Drive Extension subdivision plan for a 5-lot extension of existing town road is being continued with a discussion between the consulting engineers and the engineers for the project, as far as I know. Is that correct?
That's correct, Mr. Chairman.
Right. So both these will be continued until they're resolved and somebody ready for presentation again to the committee. The discussion of the invasive species issue will be deferred till the end of the business part of this. And there's a brief presentation that we need to look at also. So the first petition is Thomas and Ella Auchincloss, if I said it right, for special use permit at 233 Third Beach Road by David Martland. Do you want to discuss?
Yes, good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. David Martland for Thomas and Ella Auchincloss. This is it's a residential petition for property located at 233 Third Beach Road. There's an existing single-family residence on the property, as well as a garage with a dwelling unit in it. And then there is a pool located to the rear of the main house. Mr. Auchincloss was looking to build a small addition to the front of the home, 12 by 19-foot single-story addition, in which to have a home office and study located in that. The property is located in Zone 1 of the Watershed Protection District because of the proximity to Paradise Brook, which actually runs through the front yard. So we're required to seek a special use permit in connection with the project. The proposal is to build that structure on the front southerly portion of the structure to provide for the stormwater management would be the typical filings with the town. Recently, the engineer also determined through some conversations with DEM that it's likely that even though it's only 288 square feet as a result of certain changes in some of the DEM regulations, that this would require filing for an application with DEM. So the applicant will have to do that as well in connection with this proposal. So the use itself isn't changing. This is still going to be single-family residential use. There aren't going to be the storage of hazardous materials, except normal household types of materials. So I don't believe that there would be any negative impacts on the watershed as a result of the proposed construction. But I'm happy to answer any questions that the board members may have, commission members.
Any questions from the board?
I have just a quick question about the drawings that were provided. It shows a driveway, circular driveway with a stone bridge. Is that all pre-existing?
That is, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, it's the property dates back, the main house itself, boy, a few years ago, I once knew some of the history, but it's early 1800s. There are very small rooms, some steep staircases. in the property. I actually had a friend who grew up there, so as a kid, I had gone there. So I understand why Mr. Auchincloss is looking to expand, to have this type of space in the structure.
Thank you.
And Peter had a question.
Other questions from the
Isn't
group?
this wasn't this a place that we visited about 2 years ago for the same issue, I think, wasn't it?
Yeah, so if you look on the sketch, it says there's an existing kitchen addition on the, if you're looking at it on the right-hand side, which would be the northwesterly corner. So that was the expansion of the kitchen then, a couple of years ago. At that time, Mr. Auchincloss was looking to expand the existing garage, and he was
Yeah.
going to he was looking to put his home office over there.
Mhm.
As a result of the proximity to Paradise Brook and the floodplain, that just wasn't going to be feasible to be able to do that. There would be prohibitions against that type of addition in that location. So he wanted to proceed with that plan. That's what, they began looking at doing, and that just was something that couldn't be done.
We stood down from that.
Yes.
I have a couple of questions, but I think some of these are probably more directed to the engineering team for the project, but I'll voice them here so you can relay those.
Yeah, and I apologize. Unfortunately, our engineer has a conflict this evening with a matter that's before the special hearing in front of the Newport Planning Board this evening.
Okay. My first question is, on the site plan, sheet 1, there's shown a temporary soil stockpile, and there is a barrier just below it. But my question, and the drawings indicate that the barrier is going to be a standard one of 10 inches high, 10 inches straw. And my question is, with that soil stockpile right there, how high do they expect that stockpile to be? And will the 10-inch barrier be sufficient to control that in case of a hard stormwater or something? That would be one question. So is the barrier adequate for the anticipated size of the pile?
So in connection with the application for a building permit, there is a soil erosion and sedimentation control plan that is submitted with that permit that's, in more detail than what you have before you. That is subject to the review of the town engineer as well as the building official to determine the adequacy of dealing with the stormwater management associated with that construction. So Mr. Hall may have suggestions relative to what's proposed. He may have, at that time, he could raise those issues prior to any permit.
Okay. A related question to this is, I don't know if the drawing's totally accurate for what the plan is or not, but my question is, why doesn't the barrier on the left-hand side extend further up on the left-hand side? Because right now, the current end of the barrier is pretty much right at the stockpile location, and the land slope is downward to the left of there. So if that left edge of the barrier is right where the stockpile is, and you start getting a heavy rain, that the rainfall plus the stockpile could easily go around that side of the barrier. And you have a downhill slope right there on the left side. So I was thinking if they extend the barrier further out or further upwards, that would provide better protection in case of a heavy rainfall.
Yeah, I think that, Warren, were you going to?
Absolutely. Mr. Chairman, I'll comment on that if now's the time, or do you want to continue with the questioning?
Do you want a break, or do you want to have, answer the question?
I'm sorry?
Do you want Warren to help answer that question?
Sure, if Warren knows the answer.
What I would suggest is, because that does raise a good point on the stockpile area being that close to the Paradise Brook is what we're talking about here, is that as a condition, the straw wattle, which calls for on the plan, we add an additional line of silt fencing, which would be a double barrier. So you'd have the straw wattle, and then behind the wattle, you'd have the standard silt fence that's also towed in. That would add to that function of the sediment control.
Yeah, that would be better
Good
protection.
point. Yes.
Yep.
Yes, and we'll catch that. I took a note here. We'll catch that when it comes through our office for permitting as part of the soil erosion plan.
Okay, great.
Yes.
The next question is, on the site plan, sheet 6, in the upper right illustration, there is shown a new proposed patio door to be added to the left of the proposed new office room addition. Yet there's no walkway indicated as planned to that new door. Is there going to be a walkway installed? And if so, what material will the walkway be comprised of? Pervious or impervious material?
I don't have that answer, Howard.
No. You'll catch it, though, when it comes around.
We'll catch it.
You-
So if I could, every square foot of impervious will be treated with this water quality with a BMP, what the, as David was talking about here. Each square foot will be treated for runoff from this particular application here. Because, David, that area of the addition is pervious now? Is that area grass?
That's correct. It's pervious in that area presently.
Yes.
Yeah.
So each new square foot of impervious will be treated for stormwater control and water quality treatment.
Did you get an answer to your question?
I think so. I think there's probably a walkway plan to go to that new door, but there's none shown on the drawing, so my recommendation is that it gets added to the drawing,
Sure.
if they plan to do that. And then my last question is, are there rainwater gutters planned for the new structure? And if so, what will they drain to? I assume there would be, but I don't see any indication on the drawings.
No, I don't believe that there were any additional measures for rain gardens.
No, the gutters.
Oh, gutters,
on
yeah,
the- on the house.
yes, yeah. there'll be
Just
gutters.
standard gutters.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Okay, that's all I have. Thank you.
Anybody else have any questions?
I've just got a quick related question about that stockpile. Is that excavation for the addition of full basement? Or crawl space, or a slab, or?
It's supposed to be a slab, so it was going to be, that material pulled back from there and then, backfill around the area, and then the excess material taken off-site.
So basically, you're stockpiling the footings, the diggings for the footings and the slab, not a full basement? Okay.
That's correct.
I have a
Thank you.
question. On the petition for special use and then amendment of facts, on this form, it says it's a 2 single-family home.
Yeah, there is an apartment that is on the second story of the garage, so that there was a dwelling unit in that, so that's why that's
I
referenced.
didn't remember that as
Yeah.
2 families, but
Right.
this is over the garage, an apartment.
Right.
Is that it? That makes the second.
That makes it technically the second,
Because it's
Dwelling unit.
detached.
yes.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other concerns? With the questions that we've, with the problems we've proposed or discussed today, does anybody want to make any motions or comments? No?
A motion to accept it with
With the concerns?
just concerns that was brought up.
Second?
What's your first name, Tom?
Howard.
Howard.
We have second?
Yes.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? No? Good. All right. The second one on the list is petition of buildings of taste. Again, Mr. Martland, for permit to construct a deck and an expanded front and rear stair entrance within Zone 1 at
Yes. thank you,
170 Aquidneck.
Yeah, this, again, this matter is before the board. It deals with an addition to an existing building. This is the building where the Paradise Cleaners is located. Patty Watson, who's an interior designer, has purchased the property, going to be locating her business there. She's looking to undertake some upgrades to the property. One is like a front portico, to have a covered entry, and in the rear to put a deck to have some outdoor meeting space as well. The deck is going to be constructed over existing impervious area. It's presently a driveway there and parking area. So it's not increasing the amount of impervious coverage. It's located in Zone 1 of the Watershed Protection District because of the proximity to the ponds. However, the watershed doesn't actually end up in the ponds, as the commission may be aware. There's the moat to carry the stormwater to the beach. We don't believe that the addition of the deck would, impair the drinking water. We think that the use of that by the interior designer she doesn't have any hazardous materials that would pose a risk. This matter was before the technical review committee. We had an opportunity to review it. They've provided a positive recommendation to the planning board. The planning board's had an opportunity to review it, and they've also provided a positive recommendation. So our last stop before going to the zoning board is for this board to have an opportunity to review it and ask any questions you may have. But that's sort of the petition in a nutshell.
Okay. Same as last time?
Yes, sorry. Okay. Question about the stormwater runoff. As you note, the decks as proposed would be impervious surface that are over impervious surface, so not adding to the total amount of impervious surface, right?
Correct.
Okay. The question I have here is where the runoff actually goes from the property, because that area that is essentially the moat alongside the Easton's Pond. Earlier this spring, around about April, it was dug out and there was standing water in there. It's since been filled in, and so I'm wondering where is the water now going? Or was there a drain put in, or was there something else that's carrying the water away from the property?
So I know that the city of Newport is undergoing construction on that moat. They've got a CRMC permit relative to that. What they're doing is cleaning out vegetation and basically restoring some of the topography where areas have been filled in, so that the stormwater will carry from there out to the beach.
I think it would be helpful to get an update on that, maybe, because it's an area where I've actually been looking at this area in connection with identifying Japanese knotweed on the island, and that's a place where it does exist. I believe there's been some effort at mitigation. I don't know if that was done by the property owners at this location or perhaps by Newport Utility or some other entity.
Yeah, so the property line for this property ends at the pavement.
Okay, so where basically the parking area ends
Yes.
is the end of your property.
That's correct.
Is there any, I guess, how do we address the issue of where the stormwater goes and whose responsibility is it from the parking lot down?
So it drains from the parking lot onto the city of Newport
Okay,
property. And from that point, it's, the city and the water department deal with that. But those are the existing conditions. It drains from Aquidneck across this property, and whatever's also captured on this property drains. There aren't any catch basins or other measures to mitigate or deal with that. It drains in that to the west. Part of the proposal that's before the commission, there is going to be a small expansion of some landscaping area against the building, so that will actually reduce some of the runoff, but you know, that's about it as far as
I would just
improvements
say,
there.
maybe for the consideration of the commission, that this is an area that would really be ideal for some sort of runoff mitigation in terms of a water garden, rain garden area at the end of that parking lot, because that's where the water is essentially flowing. And I understand that that's not actually your property, and I'm not familiar enough with whose responsibility is to do that, but I just want to raise that for everyone's awareness of what that situation is there.
Yeah, and those are all great points. The part of what the city's doing, and Warren, you can correct me if I misstate things here, but the city's is essentially under orders to help to alleviate some of the drainage issues there. Also to protect the drinking water. And you know, they've gone through a negotiated process. Some of that dealt with then applying to CRMC for the permit to undertake measures to bolster the dam around the
Right.
drinking water, as
Yeah.
well as improve the water quality. And so they are actively undertaking those measures presently.
Yeah.
If I could just add to that, Mr. Chairman, this is part of the boat system around the reservoir.
Yeah.
So this water, this stormwater, is treated by the UV plant, City of Newport's UV plant that's right before it passes under the culvert to First Beach. So during periods of rainfall, there's a 3/4 inch or a 1 inch rainfall event. All of this stormwater gets passed through the UV process and then out into the beach area. So there is some treatment for those rain events.
Is there any chance we might be able to get an update or a briefing from Newport Water as to what they're actually doing with the moat in that area? Because most of it is filled in. There is not a lot of water flowing in that area. So, and I know this particular area that's adjacent to the parking area at 170 Aquidneck, there was standing water there for a while, a few months ago, then it was filled in.
Yes.
So I'm wondering if, you know, what is the plan there for stormwater runoff into the moat?
Certainly, I could reach out to the Newport Water Department and see what their plans are, and then report back to you at the next meeting.
If that's acceptable to the chair?
It's fine by me. My question only is if it's a stormwater runoff system, wouldn't it be dry if there were no stormwater to be there? It's designed to be used in heavy rains, correct?
So what I've observed is that the moat was actually dug out in that area, I believe in connection with the repairs that were being done to the spillway at that kind of the intersection of the North Pond and the South Pond. And I understand that was a CRMC permitted process. And so the area of the moat that is basically from this 170 Aquidneck property down to about the end of the Seawale property, that was dug out for a while. And I know that as of April this year. And more recently, August of this year, it was filled in. I don't know the reason for
How
that.
much fill was in there, did you see?
Enough fill to make it so I saw no standing water.
Was
Now-
there, it I don't know this, but
No.
could have the city of Newport laid some gravel down there?
Ye-
So it'd be pervious, and then put some soil over top of that or something like that?
Very possibly, and that's the kind of question I'd like to ask, to understand what happens with the runoff that's coming from this property and others along that area. And of course, the rest of the moat that goes behind Diego's and Cumberland Farms and onward is not dug out. I mean, it's very much overgrown. So the water isn't really flowing in a channel there. It's basically sitting in a swampy, marshy mess.
Well, perhaps this is a work in progress then.
Yeah, and I'd love to, if we can get an update on that, that'd be very helpful.
Okay?
Yeah, I agree. I think if we're basically dumping our storm runoff onto our neighboring town's land, it'd be good neighborly of us to at least have a conversation with them about it.
Okay. Any others? Peter, you had a question, I think.
No, you
Oh.
know
Oh,
this
okay.
far better than I.
Okay. Any other question about this particular property? Or we
I just
covered
have I have a quick question. Will the proposed structural changes affect or change the current stormwater runoff pattern on this property at all? Or
They
it
will
be-
not, no.
The vision will be exactly the same?
That's correct.
Okay.
Can I ask you a question? What is the purpose of this deck on the back? Is it a social one to run the business from, or loading?
So, obviously, given some of the, issues with COVID over the last year, it's to have some outdoor space to meet with clients or for staff to be able to go outside to eat.
Okay.
So those were the reasons.
Okay. Any other questions about this project?
Is it correct that this does not increase the impervious area, impervious cover of this property?
That's correct. There's no increase in the impervious area. The deck and the front entry are being built on areas that are already
So as far as that's
impervious.
concerned, there's really no change in the impervious
That's
area
correct.
as a result of this deck.
A motion?
Go ahead, Peter.
Motion? Yeah, somebody's got to make a motion.
I'll make a motion. Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that we recommend approval of the proposed structural changes based on no evident adverse impacts to the current stormwater runoff patterns or to the abutting watershed.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? No? Unanimous? Thank you. Last project discussed is the Acacia Newport house. Jeremiah Lynch presenting for a permit to construct an addition to the house.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. Jay Lynch from the law firm of Moore, Vergadamo and Lynch. Unfortunately, Lynn Small, who designed the project, is unavailable this evening to testify, so I'll do my best to walk you through the project and hopefully answer any questions that you may have. The current site is a 2-unit condominium in the building on Acacia. It is served by a septic on the property. There are no drainage features or retention ponds on the site, and the natural slope is from Bliss Mine down to the pond. A very similar proposal was in front of this commission about 2 years ago. The applicant at that point planned on demolishing the existing structure on the site and then build a new dwelling on the site. At that point, Ms. Small had designed a drainage plan that had a rain garden on it and had some swales to retain the surface water. In addition, what was proposed at that point, and is still the case on this project, is that the existing septic is going to be abandoned. There's going to be a forced main placed further down South Acacia, and the renovated dwelling is going to tie in to that forced main system. So really, the only difference here from what was in front of the commission about 2 years ago is rather than a new dwelling, it's just going to be a few additions onto the existing structure on the site. There's going to be a kind of a hexagon or type of addition off the front of the building, and that's in the Zone 1 Watershed Protection District. And there are going to be some additional additions on the, would be the north side of the building. Ms. Small's design still has the rain garden that I think we discussed 2 years ago and was requested. And now with the removal of the septic, that's going to be a benefit because now there won't be any runoff or any impact on the septic going into the pond. So the proposed use, rather than an existing two-unit condominium, is going to be a single-family home. So I don't know if you have any questions. I'll do my best to answer them.
Go Howard.
I think I have questions probably for their engineering team as well.
I listened last time, so maybe I can remember. So hopefully I can answer them.
My first question is there a descriptive identification or summary of all the changes being proposed in this petition? The reason I say that because in drawings A1 through A5 that are provided, it's not clear to me what is being added or changed. There's just drawings, but it doesn't show like before change condition and after change condition. And I think drawing A4 infers what is being added, but there's no drawing legend there or notes on the drawing to make it clear.
Well, I know there was a comprehensive boundary survey that was submitted, and I hope it got to you. That shows the existing structure on the site with the existing footprint of the building. And then as part of that, Ms. Small did prepare a proposed conditions plan which showed the additions onto the current structure. I don't know.
Well, all I'm saying is that the proposed additions, there's a lot going on in this change. It seemed to me from the proposed conditions drawing. I mean, there was proposing to cut into the town sewer system, getting rid of the septic tank, the leach field, getting rid of that, adding on the new octagon at the end, and then adding other features on around the house. So there was a lot going on, but there wasn't a clear description of what all the changes proposed are. For example, on that proposed conditions drawing that I mentioned in the front, it identified on it that the septic system was going to be removed, that there'd be a new sewer tie-in, but it showed on the north side of the drawings some changes to the building structure, and it said proposed changes, but then the octagon house or feature on the south side, I believe that's new, but that wasn't identified as a proposed change or a new change. So my point is, we think we're identifying what the proposed changes are and trying to identify how that might impact our overall evaluation. But, you know, I can't be sure that we've caught them all if we don't have a summary of the actual proposed changes.
All I can report to you is that what's on the proposed conditions plan, no more and no less will be built, because that's the plan that we've submitted with the zoning board. So we're going to be limited to those additions that are on the plan. I understand your position that it's not labeled as, you know, new octagon or some of those areas.
Well, that was an example.
Yeah, I understand.
Like I'm saying, there might be other things that are being changed that I'm not aware of and didn't catch or wouldn't catch. But, okay, so that's one question. The next question is, I did not see any soil erosion or sediment control plan on these drawings.
The only thing I think,
And I'm wondering if there is one,
am I wrong?
and
No. Yeah,
is there going to be a protective soil erosion barrier
idea when this is-
put in place for this, south of that temporary soil stockpile? Because I didn't see one indicated.
There will be, and I'm sure when we get to the point of a building permit, that we're gonna have to submit those soil erosion plans to get a permit.
Okay.
I don't know at this point whether one has been developed or not, but I'm sure that one will during the course of construction.
I also had a question relating to where the temporary soil stockpile is being shown as where it's going to be located. It seems to me like they're going to locate it on a very strong downslope of the property. And it seems to me like if there's adequate space, they could move that like 40 feet northward, northeast of that rain garden. And it's almost a lot flatter land there. And it seems to me like that'd be a more optimum location for it, rather than having it on a high slope where you could get runoff and run down. And so that's an observation. And then the new structures that are proposed, is there any tie-in plan between the runoff from those to the rain garden water quality device that's there right now?
I do know that, at least on the proposed conditions plan, there is a reference to a roof downspout collection system that is just going to be just to the, I guess, northwest of the rain garden. So it is going to be a tie-in from the downspouts, the gutters and downspouts into that drainage system.
Okay. And all the new features will tie into that?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. All right, that's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. I'm surprised you're not talking about the barrier around the refuse area. If it's a deep, steep slope, you'd be worried about the barrier.
Oh, well, I didn't know because they didn't have a plan to show what they were proposing, so.
Okay, anybody else with concerns?
What we're supposed to be, I think, mainly concerned about with this group is in the watershed protection districts, what impervious cover is over it. Do you have any percentages of how much that has changed as a result of these modifications?
I don't have a breakdown of what the percentage of impervious is going to be added to the, the existing dwelling.
Mm-hmm.
I do know that there's, an addition that's going to be on the northwest side of the building, and then that hexagon on the south side of the building.
On the south side.
But beyond that, I don't have a breakdown of what that percentage is.
So that's something Lynn Small would
She
know,
would be
I
able to,
guess,
should be able to,
she was
to
here.
identify that. And what, I think what's important to find out is that what's going to be there after this construction is going to be a much better stormwater maintenance system than what's there now. There's nothing there right now, so. But I don't have that information for you.
So there'd be a gutter around the entire new construction, as well as the octagon, goes to the gutters and goes to the rain garden.
Yeah, that's my understanding of the plan here, is that there's the downspout collection system, that everything is going to be tied in and put into that area.
Is there any way of determining whether the size of the rain garden is adequate for a storm of some sort or not? I don't know.
I don't know. I'm sure Ms. Small is more qualified, and she designed it, I think, based upon the standards. And again, this is another project that is going to have to go to CRMC as well, because we are under CRMC jurisdiction, so that they're going to review the drainage again. But I don't know.
Okay. And the sewage from the entire structure will be pumped up Acacia like was planned several years ago when we
That
went
is
through this whole thing?
That's going to
Okay.
still stay, yes.
So the only issue really here is increased impervious footprint and where's the rainwater go,
That's correct.
from what I can see. And those are still sort of open questions?
Issues.
Show how do you want to approach that?
Can we, excuse me, Mr. Chairman, can we forward our recommendation? I think we have to send our recommendation to the planning board, is it, or to the zoning board?
The
Zoning board.
Zoning board. I'm thinking that maybe we could send a recommendation to the zoning board identifying the information that still needs to be provided for us to recommend approval or to go forward with this.
Well, the question is, do we need to continue this till another session when Mrs. Small is here, or should we write a letter saying these are our concerns, et cetera, and do both?
I have a suggestion, if the
Sure.
commission would entertain it. You know, that if you could recommend approval subject to Mr. Hall reviewing Ms. Small's documents and then signing off saying that the design is sufficient, you know, for the size and the additions. That's an option. So there will be one further review process. You know, we are going to need to get that approval.
Warren, is this a TRC issue at all?
Mr. Chairman, no, this won't go to the TRC.
No.
Okay.
So-
Is it appropriate to forward this to you or to forward it to another committee?
I think you forward it to the committee, to the zoning board, with the condition that it meets our soil erosion sedimentation control ordinance, which is chapter 151, that it meets our stormwater runoff, which is chapter 153. Both of those will come under my review before the building permit is issued. And at that time, I will answer the questions about the size of the rain garden and whether or not what it's treated, what it's going to treat, what storm event. So the rain garden itself, just to answer Howard's questions, the rain garden is probably, and I don't have the numbers, but it's probably sized to handle the water quality volume, which is the first inch of runoff over the impervious area. Usually the additional impervious area, not the area that's on the lot already. So it's whatever the addition is. That's what that rain garden will be sized for. Will require the 2, 10, 25, and maybe even the 100-year storm event to be treated and held before it's allowed to flow off of the site. That's what we've been doing now with all new impervious.
Okay. And who confirms that the calculations are correct?
I do.
All right.
I do. For this single-family residential, something simple like this, I will, because it's a short review. It's not as intense as a 10-lot subdivision or a 6-lot
Okay.
subdivision.
And the review for the rain garden, you only have to certify it for the additional construction, not for the original plus the additional construction.
Correct,
All right,
correct.
that's okay. So there could be some runoff over the rain garden because you're including it, the rain garden amount, in the original construction, but we have no way of evaluating that.
That's right. The rain garden will be designed to handle that flow through it at the same time.
All right.
Also, I would suggest that you do the same for this application as we did for the previous one, is that we had a double sediment barrier. We had the straw wattles and the silt fence. So we have a backup to the straw wattles.
Sounds like a good
Yeah.
Okay.
way to proceed to me.
All right,
Do we have a proposal
Mr.
in it?
Chairman,
Oh,
I make
please.
a motion that we recommend approval to go forward with this petition with the list of recommendations that we will forward to the zoning board of the things we mentioned earlier.
Okay.
I second it.
All in favor of that?
Aye.
Opposed? Carries? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Have a good evening.
That it?
Great. Okay, fantastic. Try to write a couple letters, I guess. All right, we have one last issue we're going to discuss that's been put off for a few weeks, is about invasive species, brought about originally from a letter from, 2 letters from the public about Japanese knotweed, and continuing on onto other subjects perhaps. And Melissa had a presentation she wanted to give first, and we can open it for further discussion if you'd like. Is that fair?
Yes. Okay, Nate, can you bring that up? Okay. All right, so just as Chairman just said, you can go on to the next slide, that's you.
That's it.
As Jim said, we were contacted by a resident who raised concerns specifically about Japanese knotweed. We discussed this at our July meeting and decided that this was something that the commission should look into. And I volunteered to do a little bit of research on the issue. Howard volunteered to help out on that as well. And so the purpose today is to provide some background for the commission to familiarize yourselves with this invasive species, if you're not already familiar, and to explore some possible recommendations we might want to make in terms of addressing the issue. And just in terms of the scope note, we are focusing specifically on Japanese knotweed tonight. There are a lot of other invasives, but it's possible that the approach that we take could be expanded to other invasives in the future. But tonight we're just going to talk about Japanese knotweed. So next slide. So just to give some basic background, Japanese knotweed is a shrub. It's native to East Asia and was introduced to the U.S. in the late 1800s. In fact, Frederick Law Olmsted, who designed Central Park and also some gardens here in Newport or on Aquidneck Island, he introduced it as an ornamental, and it has spread rapidly. In terms of identification, you can see in the lower center, it has a bamboo type structure. It's not actually a member of the bamboo family, but it has that segmented type stem and those heart-shaped leaves in a zigzag pattern. What's most distinctive and easiest to recognize right now at this time of year are those white flowers, little white flowers, and if you look around for them, you'll see them everywhere. It's a perennial, so it dies back in the winter, but then it regrows in the spring. Next slide. So there's a lot of definitions of what makes a plant an invasive, but I can say that this one ticks all the boxes. It displaces other plants. It is a very dense growth that threatens other plant species and other animal species that depend on those plants. It's a very fast grower, can grow 3 to 8 inches a day and up to 10 feet high. And it spreads extremely rapidly, especially along roadways and street banks, and also areas where the soil has been disturbed, such as places where construction has been taking place. Next slide. So we have a lot of invasives on the island, things like bittersweet, multiflora rose, phragmites, lots of things. But why is Japanese knotweed considered such a problem? One of the main reasons is that it is incredibly destructive. It can grow through asphalt, cement, brick, stonework, and that is really a problem. It's extremely hard to eradicate. If it's cut, even a little piece of it, an inch long, can regrow, propagate. And it's very easily spread. It spreads both by seeds and roots. And if you see that center picture on the lower side, you can see that even if you just see small plants at the surface, there can be a very thick root underneath there. And it can be spread through things like yard waste and mulch and topsoil and through waterways. So that's some of the reasons why it is considered such a problem. Next slide. So the question for us, is it really a problem here in Middletown? So the first place I went to look was Paradise Valley Park. And at first, I was somewhat encouraged because I only found that little small patch on the lower right-hand side. But next slide. It didn't take long before I approached where the schoolhouse is, and you can see there's quite an extensive patch there. And next slide. This is the view along that kind of stone wall in front of where the schoolhouse is. And next slide. So same area, but if you're standing on Paradise Avenue, that's what you see. You can see the little bit of the school peeking up above the top of the knotweed, but it's an extensive patch right there. And in fact, since the big storm we had, a lot of this has been kind of flattened where the water runoff was, but you can still see how densely it's growing there. Next slide. So looking at another location, just to point out that in this area in particular, in Paradise Valley Park, there's a beautiful stone wall and fencing that was put in, and you can hardly see the stone wall in this area, and it's definitely encroaching on the fence as well. Next slide. So looking at another area, and this will give you a clue as to how I know what's going on in the moat area behind 170 Aquidneck Avenue, but this was back in April, and you can see that there was knotweed that was starting to sprout. And I went back to take a look at this later in the summer, expecting it to have grown significantly, but next slide. So this is what it looked like in August. It had clearly been cut, maybe had some chemical application, I don't really know, but it was still resprouting. You can also see there where the moat's been filled in. So, in fact, I went back just doing a drive-by a couple days ago, and it's probably about 1.5 to 2 feet high. So it's regrowing there again. So next slide. Once you start to look for it and you know what to look for, you will see it everywhere, I guarantee you. Around, that's behind the Porta-Johns at the Third Beach boat ramp, along Bailey's Brook behind Shaw's. You really will see it everywhere. I can't stop seeing it, unfortunately. So next slide. So don't just take my word for it. We reached out to a number of experts to get their take on it. And as you can see, everyone from Aquidneck Land Trust, Norman Bird Sanctuary identified this as a real problem locally. I did reach out to Will Cronin, and particularly because if it gets into our yard waste that's collected and sent to Rhode Island nurseries, it can propagate in the yard waste. So he said specifically Rhode Island nurseries does not want Japanese knotweed in yard waste. Other experts saying that knotweed is really one of the most difficult species to control. So next slide. So looking around at what sort of laws or ordinances are on the books, Rhode Island doesn't have a specific law addressing Japanese knotweed, but it does have this general law that allows any town to remove plants that are considered injurious from public grounds. Middletown doesn't have any specific town ordinance, neither does Newport. I found one for Portsmouth that's kind of in draft, but so nothing specifically addressing Japanese knotweed or other invasive species. Next slide. So we wanted to take a look at maybe what some other communities are doing about this. And Howard found that New Hampshire has probably one of the strongest laws addressing the problem of Japanese knotweed. So it is specifically listed as a prohibited invasive species. And that means it cannot be transported, sold, distributed, anything within the state. And also, Japanese knotweed is prohibited from being in fill, so soil that would be brought into a construction site. Next slide. Another community that has taken a strong stance against that is Eastham, Massachusetts. They have a good page on their website. It has a lot of good information, an information sheet. It even has a video with a good public service announcement about this is what it looks like, this is how to deal with it, et cetera. So that was a good example of just raising awareness at the community level. Next slide. And a really good example over in Narragansett, there's a nonprofit volunteer group called the Friends of Canonchit Farm, and they have partnered with Narragansett Parks and Recreation with the approval of Narragansett Town Council to address the problem of invasives around Canonchit Lake, which is across from Town Beach in Narragansett. Not just Japanese knotweed, but that's one of the major problems that they're dealing with there. They've also partnered with URI, Cooperative Extension, to help bring in some experts or some folks who are learning about dealing with invasives. And so they've made a really good effort. They also have a video you can see online talking about how they've addressed this issue. And they've really made some great progress. It's kind of encouraging to see that. So next slide. So there really are a lot of resources available. We don't have to reinvent the wheel, and we can point to organizations that have expertise in this area. I'd also note that URI Cooperative Extension has a training course in invasive plant management, and they list, there's a website that shows lists of people who have taken that course, who are certified invasive managers. So they have learned how to deal with this and other invasive species. And as you can see, there are 4 listed in Middletown and more in Newport and Portsmouth. So there are resources out there, people that we could reach out to ask for help on this. Next slide. So for the Commission's consideration to say, well, what could we do about it? These are just a few suggestions for consideration, but I think some of the easy short-term actions would be to just begin to raise awareness. We can use the town's website, social media, newsletter to get people familiar, to start identifying and learning about this invasive species. A fact sheet, like the one we saw on the Easton website, Quidnick Land Trust also has a very good one. We could have a link on our website that would send people to that information or to any of those other resources that I showed. There's quite a lot available. One specific action to take would be to add Japanese knotweed to the list of plants that are not accepted in the town's yard waste. Again, as in my discussion with Will Cronin, he said this is something that Rhode Island Nurseries is concerned about when they receive our yard waste. If this stuff is in it, it can spread that way. Another action we might consider is whether we want to ask Public Works to develop an approach to what do you do when you see this? What do you do when it's on the side of the road and you're supposed to cut in that area? You know, how are we going to address that? Just to address how we manage it on town property, and then that might help provide maybe some guidelines we might develop for, informing the public writ large, but I think starting with town property would be a good way to begin. In the longer term, obviously we live on an island and Japanese knotweed does not respect borders, and so it's really a bigger issue than Middletown. I would suggest coordinating with Portsmouth and Newport would be a good way to start to get a handle on this for the island. Also, coordinating with the local land stewards, like the Land Trust, like Bird Sanctuary. They're dealing with this right now, and they recognize it as a problem, and they are taking action on their properties. And then just in terms of outreach, I mentioned URI. They offer speakers. There may be an opportunity to set up some sort of workshop where we could show people this is what it looks like, this is how it can be dealt with. Maybe that's something to be done at the local level by folks like the Bird Sanctuary, but it's still something we might want to consider. And then finally, maybe down the road to think about, do we need to have a town ordinance that specifies specifically how we should address this particular problem? So that's just based on the research that we did so far. I would also ask Howard if there's anything you want to add. Please jump right in.
No, I don't have anything to add. I think you did a very complete and excellent job. I want to thank you. I mean, it's obvious that you put a lot of work and a lot of research into this, and I applaud you. It's an outstanding job. Thank you.
Last slide, if there's any questions.
I'd just like to second thank you for putting this together. This is a huge problem all over New England. Your photos tended to center on southern Middletown, but the Quidnick Land Trust trails, there's knotweed just lining all of them. It tends to like edgelands between woods and cultivated fields or lawns or things like that. I feel a little bit defeatist because it's a real problem without a real solution, and it's nice to see New Hampshire has a strong law. I owned a property in New Hampshire, in Nashua, and it's everywhere up there. And it's not just that, it's bittersweet as well. And the bittersweet's in the Quidnick Land Trust lands as well, and that will topple trees. It will pull trees down. So I think having some sort of comprehensive approach is good. Again, I may be a little defeatist on this because I don't know what you're really going to do about it, but ignoring it certainly won't make it go away. They say they won't accept it in the landfill, but people need options.
Right.
You only burn it, you have to do something with it if you're going to eradicate it.
Right. Yeah, that was my question. So I know, like, on larger areas, but what about if it's on someone's home? How do they get rid of it? If you can't put it at the end of your street to get rid of it, So that's an issue, everything.
And that's where I would suggest that from the town's perspective, I don't know if we want to get into advising people how to deal with it, but if we give them information and give them these fact sheets and point them to resources like the list of certified invasive managers, we're giving them tools to say this is how you can address it. Maybe we would want to add something like, on the town website, if you're concerned about this issue, send us an email. And then if we can get together with the Land Trust, with the Bird Sanctuary, and say we'd like to do an eradication workshop. Maybe we use Paradise School as an example. Bring people there, show them what it looks like, and then have someone from URI or someone talk about, well, what do we do in this circumstance? I would hesitate to recommend one strategy over another because it seems that in different circumstances, different things might work. And there are some new technologies coming up, including a type of inoculation, believe it or not, where you actually inject specific herbicides into the plant. The thing is, people might be tempted to use something like Roundup. It won't kill it.
Right.
And then you've got the problem of spreading,
Roundup.
those chemicals around. Cutting it, cutting it consistently, but it's going to take 3 to 5 years maybe to get rid of it. And you've got to bag the clippings and let them rot. So you can't, or you got to put them in the trash, as in landfill, not in yard waste. So there's just a lot of complications in terms of recommending how individual people deal with it. But I think it is something to consider as stewards of town lands, how we might address that.
Yeah, so the volunteers at that farm, they were just
Yeah.
cutting it down, or did they say what their process was?
So they didn't really describe exactly everything they were doing, and they were talking about other invasives as well, but it's worth watching. I can send around the link to the video. And that the fact that they were clearing it, and I think their approach, I'm extrapolating here, but I think their approach was to just keep clearing it, and every time it comes up again, cut it down again, and just to try to discourage it. And what they did say in the video was that some native species that they hadn't seen for a while were starting to regrow. And if they can get a hold and start to crowd out the knotweed, maybe it can succeed. But it's a very, very tough issue, and it requires a dedicated program plan over years to make a difference.
I did read that in order to eradicate, you almost have to eradicate the roots at the same time.
Yeah,
And so you're digging up, not only are you pulling the plants up, but you're digging up all the roots down to whatever, 6 inches, 9 inches, a foot,
Right.
and then replacing all the soil to get rid of it.
yeah,
And even then, it doesn't always work because the roots are so deep and so dense.
right.
I've also read that Roundup works, but you need lots of it.
Yeah.
And you need to do it twice, not just once, but twice. That's pretty daunting.
Especially near waterways,
Yeah.
I would hesitate to
I
take
mean,
that approach.
it's very
so,
dangerous for bees and other insects
Yeah.
around there and things you want to be there
right.
using that much Roundup. Unless if there's a new herbicide that's more effective and less harmful, that'd be great. But, if I've got a yard full of Japanese knotweed and I've got to bag it for the garbage, I'm going to need 20 bags
Yeah,
to bag it with.
And
And
then
that's,
it's sitting there, right?
well, it costs
Unless you're putting
costs a lot of
it in
money to do it, number one. Number two, people are not that
Conscientious.
motivated most of
it's
the time.
asking a lot to
Yeah.
have individual homeowners do that, but at least I think setting in a good example for the town might be a good way to start.
I-
If that's coupled with public awareness of
Mhm.
why we're doing it.
Right.
and
I
what
think
the
there's
problem
two issues here, one of which is a homeowner issue,
Right.
and one of which is a town of Middletown issue in public spaces.
Mhm.
And I think the second would be easier to handle, as far as having a workshop and maybe a little group of high school kids doing their Eagle Scout stuff,
Right,
and get the whole community involved in some way, and they make it sort of like a weekend project sort of thing. That would work, except that you have to come back over and over again to do it.
yeah.
Except if you've got heavy equipment, it's gonna dig it all up and that sort of stuff, but it sounds quite involved. So the idea of just going back, clipping it and throwing it away isn't gonna work.
Yeah,
And so I made a big list of all the invasive species that are around here, and there are like multiple ones.
yeah.
Yep.
And we're certainly allowed to focus on just one at this point, but that doesn't really address the whole issue of invasive species, because that's quite a complicated project.
It is.
Do you think there's any, I mean, I would love to see a pamphlet put out like they do every year for the
Right,
garbage, when they send out the
Yeah.
pay your $141 thing,
Mhm.
and say, this is what we're looking, this is from the committee, and we're looking at these 5 invasive species, or perhaps just one this year. And this is what you do, but I don't have a what you do yet clear in
Right.
my mind yet.
yeah.
No, that's the thing. That's where I think we
Facts
want
about
to,
it.
yeah, we want to rely on one of these fact sheets. As I said, Aquidneck Land Trust has a good one. That could be, if we could ask them for permission to make that an enclosure. And also to add it to the prohibited list on the yard waste site, which is on the town
Yeah.
website. So at least that we're taking a stand and we're getting the word out about it. And then I really think tapping into maybe the URI folks
Yeah.
and asking, could they come maybe in conjunction with Public Works and do a workshop, focus on the Paradise Paradise School area.
Workshop for us, workshop for the public, workshop what?
You know, that's a good question. It could start with Public Works, or it could start with the public, or we could talk about what makes sense. It could be something that we as the commission go to so that we get better informed. That might help us make better recommendations.
Well, the Middletown Historical Society takes care of that particular building.
Yeah. And I'm
You
happy
could somehow
to
coordinate
address
with
that
them.
with them, because I'm in contact with them as well. I know that they, I understand that there has been a request to cut it down. Not sure exactly where that came from, but I understand that sentiment. I mean, it's blocking, as you saw, it's taking
But
over the
that's not-
whole, yeah, but how to go about doing that. Frankly, for this season, you know, it's going to start to die back in the winter, so do we use the winter time to perhaps reach out to URI, reach out to a few other folks at Land Trust and whatnot, and come up with a plan for the spring when it starts to sprout?
Did your reading suggest that cutting back and trying to eradicate it in the fall is more effective than doing it in the spring?
I didn't find anything about that specifically.
Because when I just
Well,
wondered.
seeing it's in flower right now, it's going to seed right now.
Yeah.
So my guess is we missed the boat this year.
It's almost like before it seeds, probably should
Yeah.
cut it.
Well, would that be in the,
It is.
So probably be like early spring.
Because
I don't know, I don't know,
homeowners that
Yeah, 'cause
have
it grows fast.
I don't know.
Right.
cut it back, it goes in the yard waste. And,
And you cut it back here, and it'll grow over there.
right.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
poor ignorant homeowner will not know.
Yeah,
Yeah,
my
it all
concern is
goes
the
in one
home-
big pile.
Yeah, my concern too is the
Yeah.
homeowner, what we're gonna do with it if you have that.
Yeah.
I can't imagine bagging 30 bags of
Right.
knotweed.
So one
and paying
option.
$10 a bag to do it.
One option, and I'm not going to claim any expertise on this, just based on what I've read, is to take the cuttings, put them in a black, heavy contractor trash bag, leave them out for the entire year, and let them decompose in the bag. And
And
then presumably they're
Where do you
safe,
put it?
but I would want an expert to say that. This is where I think we need to, you know, first raise awareness of it, because people are probably seeing it and not recognizing it for what it is, and not understanding how invasive it is and how quickly it will spread. So first, raise awareness. And secondly, try to come up with, you know, tap into experts who can advise us how to
I
deal
think
with
that
it.
raising awareness without having a way of ridding it, both from your yard and from your property in a safe manner and making it not come back again, is premature. I would recommend having your URI conference first and come up with some solutions, and then putting it out to the public. But just making people aware of something they can't do anything about doesn't really work for
Well,
everyone.
and I mean making it aware with the fact sheet. So putting that on the town website and saying, here's information, which does include ways to deal with it. Maybe I could send around a couple examples of those fact sheets, and we could take a look at them,
I
see
saw
if you
them,
think it's,
I saw them before.
It
but-
may unfortunately encourage people to, oh, that's bad, I'm going to
Yeah.
cut it and put it in the barrels, let the town pick it up.
Yeah.
You know, and
Right. That's
Well,
what's gonna happen.
The fact,
And how do you control that?
And this is only one of many
Here's your-
invasive
Right,
species.
Right. I've got-
And, that's a big
I mean, I think it'd be
education
nice to have the sheet,
challenge.
I mean, as a homeowner, I look through that stuff that I get from Will, and maybe that could be something that goes out next year if we have good facts about it and how to take care of it, or homeowners, I don't know, you know?
so if we take the approach of, let's use the winter to learn as much as we can about it and come up with a strategy, then maybe that's the way to
I
go.
think that's a great
We
idea.
can start for the spring.
I concur we need more information before we deal with the public at all. And I would, if URI is a better source than other people, then we should possibly invite somebody here to come up with a list of our 15 questions of how to write this pamphlet up
Okay.
appropriately, so people can do something with it, rather than just say, oh, that's a problem. I think that's a good choice.
Yeah,
I
'cause
think URI could,
Eastham, Mass had some stuff on their website too, you said,
Yes.
so
I
maybe
couldn't
we
read
look
it,
at
but-
that.
could we
Did it-
invite
did it
somebody from
suggest-
URI to speak with us? Just,
Yeah.
start
Well,
here?
that's what she was saying,
Yeah.
yeah.
I can reach out to them and see what they can do for us, and see if they would come here, or we could Zoom, or do something. And they do have a website where you can request a speaker, so I'll just have to put in something for why we're requesting it. I'd suggest maybe we want to Also reach out to the Land Trust and the Bird Sanctuary, 2 places that we know are dealing with it in Middletown, and maybe get them to be part of the,
What did the Eastham website say about, I mean, they're talking to the public, as
Right, 'cause you
Oriana
said it was
said.
on the, it was
Did
on
they- Is
their
it just a
website.
descriptive, or they say this is how you get rid of it?
they do have, their fact sheet does have some recommendations on it as well. Let me see if I can pull it up real quick. Well, I don't need to do this now, but they did have some recommendations in terms of how to deal with it as well, so.
Okay. Would this be an appropriate thing for our next meeting? Or should we delay it some more until we come up with some questions at the next meeting that we should ask them?
I would invite anyone who's interested to send questions to me, maybe, and then I'll reach out to URI. I can't promise that I'll have an answer by next meeting, but I'll keep you posted.
So rather than having them come here and speak with us, we should have the questions done through you. That's easy to do.
If you would like to do it that way, because then I'll just kind of consolidate our questions and funnel them there and see what they can do for us in terms of would they send a speaker or some other approach.
And you said there was
A
like,
speaker on that would be good. We've had other issues
Mhm.
like that for which we've had speakers,
Mhm.
coyotes, for example.
oh, right.
Yep.
And look what happened to that.
Spoke, and people, this can spread.
So
We had a few of those sessions.
I'll just mention that the Japanese knotweed information sheet that's on the Eastham website has things like, how do I identify Japanese knotweed? How do I control it if I find it on my property? Commit before you cut, because you're going to have to keep at it for 3 to 5 years. Proper disposal is critical. What about using herbicides? So they give a variety of approaches.
So we
to
can look
dealing
on
with
their website, it's just right on their town website.
Yeah.
How about those certified managers that was for Middletown?
Yep, so one of them is Alex Schuman, who's at the Quidnick Land Trust.
Oh, okay.
So that's one reason why we might reach out to him. I think the others, I have a list of them actually on the, could you go, Nate, could you go through the backup slides? I think there might be the next one. One more. I'm sorry, go to the next slides after the questions. Keep going down further in the other direction. Other direction. Keep going.
It's hot in here, isn't it? It's warm, right?
One more. Oh, one more. There we go. So there's the list of the ones in Middletown, but
Very
there's more in
Special
Portsmouth and Newport as well.
Quinnick Land, what is that what it says?
Professional property maintenance. Could do.
So just to say that there's people we can reach out to locally.
Yeah, maybe that be a place to start too.
Could have a summit, invasive species summit.
Okay, well, let's,
Get them
Yeah.
all in one room.
Table that?
let's forward questions to Melissa. Look
So
at
what
different
was Melissa?
websites,
Melissa, I'll
and
email her.
we discuss this at our next meeting. Does that sound fair?
Yep.
Right.
I'll give you a progress report. I don't promise to have all the answers by then.
No, we don't
Well, you
expect
did
that.
a really nice job.
I want to repeat a thank you for the work you've done so far, because
Right.
this is a big issue. We obviously don't have all the solutions now, but at least it's a start, look into it.
Thanks.
Okay. Does anybody want to discuss other invasive species, or you want to just focus on this particular one? There are like
There are
many of them.
Yes.
Do you think that,
I think the focus on the Japanese knotweed right now is because it's so difficult to eradicate, to get rid of. Are there other invasive species that are equally difficult to get rid of?
I think bittersweet would probably be the next on the list,
there
and
you go.
people unfortunately use
Oh,
that
is that it right
decoratively
there?
too, they
You
cut it
can't-
and
I mean, can we
make
have
wreaths
it on
and
the
things.
list, maybe? Just have
You
it on.
can't eradicate that,
Howard,
by,
here's your list.
I know, but, my
Oh.
question is, what invasive species are hard to eradicate? Like
Multiflora
Japanese
rose,
knotweed.
bittersweet, and knotweed. Those are the top three. I think.
I know I've got a lot of invasive species on my property, but I know if I, pull them out by the roots and cut them up, they don't come back.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think that's one of the reasons why knotweed is such a problem, that it is so hard to eradicate. It grows so quickly and so densely. So the reason I think people start to get concerned about it is one day you have a lovely view of the pond, 2 weeks later you can't see the pond anymore. So that's not really the same issue that you encounter with things like multiflora rose to the same extent.
Right.
So I think that's one of the reasons why it's of greater concern to get ahead of it if we possibly can. But, yeah,
So my extension is, if there are real easy ones to get rid of also,
Yeah,
why start with the really, why not just include those with the really hard one?
I'm not opposed
Well-
to that. I think if we can get a good strategy and a good plan in place for this one, which I think is the most, to me, seems the most urgent, then
Okay.
maybe the others can fall in line.
Okay, we'll leave it at that.
One quick question on that. Do we have any kind of relationship with our sister counterparts in Portsmouth, for example? I think they have a conservation commission. I was thinking of reaching out to them.
They do, I think, but Newport does not, if I recall correctly.
Yes, so, any concern with me reaching out to Portsmouth? Well, all right,
I don't think so.
I'll give that a try too.
All right. With that in mind, I would make a motion of some sort.
Motion to adjourn?
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that we adjourn the meeting.
Second.
Second, all in favor?
Aye. Thank
Good
you.
enough. Meeting's adjourned at 6:40.